My name is Rachel Monroe. I'm 38 years old, a librarian in Dallas, Texas, and for 12 years, I believed that love meant disappearing. I gave up my art career, my apartment, my dreams, everything, to take care of my mother after what she called a devastating fall. I moved back into my childhood bedroom, turned my easel into a medicine cabinet, and made myself invisible so she could be comfortable. I thought devotion was supposed to feel warm. Instead, it felt like drowning in slow motion. Last month was her 65th birthday. I spent 3 days planning the perfect dinner party. The dining room looked like something from a magazine. Candles flickering, relatives laughing, neighbours sharing stories about what a wonderful woman she was. I stood in the kitchen doorway, watching her hold court at the head of the table, and felt something I hadn't felt in years: pride. Maybe this was it. Maybe this was the moment she'd finally see me, acknowledge what I'd sacrificed, tell everyone how grateful she was. She stood up, wine glass in hand, her voice carrying that theatrical warmth she saved for audiences. "I want to make a toast," she said, and the room went quiet. To family, to love, and to new beginnings. I stepped forward, thinking she was about to thank me. Instead, she looked directly at me, her smile sharp as broken glass, and said the words that shattered everything I thought I knew about us. "Rachel, sweetheart, the best birthday gift you could give me is to leave my life. You've done your duty. It's time we both moved on." The room went silent. Not the comfortable silence of a family dinner, but the suffocating silence of a public execution. I felt every pair of eyes turn to me, felt the heat rise in my cheeks like a fever. My cousin Sarah's fork stopped halfway to her mouth. Mrs. Patterson from next door looked like she'd swallowed her tongue. I didn't scream, I didn't cry, I didn't even speak. I set down the serving spoon I'd been holding, walked to the front door, and left. Behind me, I heard my mother's voice, bright and cheerful, as if nothing had happened. "Now, who wants more wine?" She didn't just humiliate me, she opened a door I could never close again. Because here's what she didn't know, what none of them knew. I'd been keeping records, every doctor's appointment, every prescription, every bill. And what I found in those records was going to change everything. At Whispers of Revenge, we know that sometimes the people who demand your entire life are the ones who deserve it least. Hit subscribe to see how I turned 12 years of devotion into the perfect plan for justice. And tell me, when someone erases you in public, do you disappear quietly, or do you make them remember why they should have kept you close? The next morning, I woke up in my childhood bedroom and stared at the ceiling I'd been staring at for 12 years. The same water stain, the same crack in the corner, the same feeling of being trapped in amber while the world moved on without me. But something had shifted. The humiliation from the night before had burned away the fog of obligation, leaving behind something sharp and clear, questions I should have asked years ago. I pulled out a notebook, the same kind I used to sketch in before I gave up art, and started writing, not feelings, facts. "Day 1 of investigation," I wrote at the top. "Why now? Why in public? What does she gain by erasing me?" My mother was already in the kitchen, humming like nothing had happened. She looked up when I walked in, her smile as placid as always. "Good morning, dear. Coffee's fresh." I poured a cup and watched her face. No guilt, no acknowledgement of what she'd done. Just that serene mask she wore when she thought she'd won something. "About last night," I started. "Oh, that!" She waved a hand dismissively. "People understood. They know you've been under stress." Under stress, as if my humiliation was a medical condition she could diagnose away. I needed air. I needed space to think. "I'm going to run some errands," I said. "Take your time, dear," she said, not looking up from her crossword. "I'll be here." Of course she would. She'd been here for 12 years, watching me shrink. My first stop was the bank. I'd been managing her accounts for years, but I'd never really looked at them. Not closely. I sat across from Janet, the branch manager, and asked to see the transaction history for the past 6 months. "Is there a problem?" she asked, her fingers flying across the keyboard. "I hope not," I said. But my gut was already telling me otherwise. The printouts she handed me made my blood run cold. Transfers I didn't remember making. Withdrawals signed with my name. But the handwriting was wrong. Too neat, too careful. I'd been signing my mother's checks for years. I knew the difference between my rushed scrawl and this deliberate forgery. "These signatures," I said, pointing to 3 different transactions. "This isn't my handwriting." Janet leaned forward, studying the papers. "You're right," she said quietly. "These look practiced." $8,000. Gone. Siphoned out in careful increments over 6 months. "I need copies of everything," I said, "and I need to file a fraud report." My hands were shaking when I left the bank, not from fear, from rage. But I wasn't done yet. I drove straight to the county clerk's office and asked to see the deed to our house. The house I'd been told was ours, the house I'd given up my apartment to help maintain. The clerk handed me a folder that felt heavier than it should have. I opened it and found my worst fear confirmed. My name, which had been on the deed as a co-owner since my father died, had been quietly removed. A new deed, filed just 3 months ago, showed only my mother's name. "When was this change made?" I asked. "March 15th, the clerk said. "Signed and notarized. March 15th. The day I'd gone to visit my old art professor, the first time I'd left the house for something that wasn't a doctor's appointment or grocery run in months. She'd encouraged me to go, said she'd be fine alone for a few hours. She'd used my absence to erase me from my own home. I drove back in a daze, the papers burning in my passenger seat. When I walked through the front door, I saw my house differently. The living room where I'd spent countless evenings reading to her. The kitchen where I'd cooked thousands of meals. None of it was mine anymore. I was a guest in a place I'd sacrificed everything to maintain. But the worst was still coming. I went to my room, my former room, to get my art supplies. The corner where I used to keep my easel, my paints, my canvases, it was empty, completely empty. "Mom," I called out, my voice echoing through the house, "where are my art supplies?" She appeared in the doorway, that same serene smile. "Oh, those old things. I donated them to the community centre. You haven't used them in years, dear. I thought someone else might enjoy them. Someone else might enjoy them, my life's work, my identity, my connection to who I used to be before I became her caretaker. Gone." "You had no right," I whispered. "I was cleaning," she said simply, "making space for what matters." That's when I knew. This wasn't about cleaning or charity or making space. This was about erasing every trace of who I was before I became her shadow. The next few days passed in a blur of discovery, each revelation worse than the last. I'd become a detective in my own life, and every piece of evidence I uncovered painted a picture of systematic erasure. I found credit cards in my name that I'd never opened, charges for expensive dinners, jewellery, spa retreats, all signed with careful forgeries of my name, practiced until they looked real. Mrs. Doyle from next door knocked on my door Tuesday afternoon, her face creased with worry. "Rachel, honey, I need to tell you something. Your mother, she's been saying things about you." My stomach dropped. "What kind of things?" "She told the Hendersons you've been unstable, paranoid. She's worried about your mental health." Mrs. Doyle's voice was gentle, but her words hit like hammer blows. "She's been asking about facilities, places where you could get help." Facilities? My mother was laying the groundwork to have me committed. "There's more," Mrs. Doyle continued. "She's been calling your family, your cousin Sarah, your Uncle Tom, telling them you've been acting erratic, that you might be dangerous to yourself." The phone calls started that evening. Sarah first, her voice tight with manufactured concern. "Rachel, we're worried about you. Mom says you've been having episodes." Episodes, as if discovering theft was a mental breakdown. "She says you've been accusing her of things," Sarah continued, "making up stories about money." I hung up. Then Uncle Tom called. Then my mother's sister, Aunt Helen. Each conversation the same script. Concern, confusion, the gentle suggestion that maybe I needed professional help. My mother had weaponized my family against me. Mrs. Doyle slipped me a business card as she left. "My nephew," she said quietly, "he specializes in family law, elder abuse cases." Thursday morning I called James Carter. His office smelled like leather and old books, familiar and comforting. I spread the bank statements, the forged signatures, the deed changes across his mahogany desk. "This is financial elder abuse," he said, studying the documents. "But in reverse, she's the elder abusing you. Can we prove it?" "We can, but Rachel," he leaned back in his chair, "you need to be careful. If she's telling people you're unstable, she might be building a case for guardianship. If she succeeds, she could have you declared incompetent. You'd lose everything." "She's already taken everything." "Not everything," he said. "You still have your freedom and your voice, but we need to move fast." That night I lay in my childhood bed and stared at the ceiling, my mind racing. A memory surfaced, sharp and painful. I was 26, standing in a gallery in Deep Ellum, my paintings on the walls, wine glasses clinking, people actually buying my work. My mother had called that night, crying. "I fell, Rachel. I think I broke my hip. The doctors say I need surgery, but I'm so scared to be alone." I'd left the gallery, left my opening night, left my career, rushed home to take care of her. The broken hip turned out to be a bruise. The surgery never happened. But by then, I'd already given notice at my apartment, already told the gallery I couldn't commit to future shows. I'd already chosen her over me, and she'd been planning this from the beginning. Friday afternoon, Mrs. Doyle knocked again. This time her face was pale. "Rachel, you need to know. I just overheard your mother on the phone. She's planning an intervention for Sunday. She's invited your whole family. She's going to try to have you declared mentally incompetent." The words hit me like ice water. Sunday, 2 days away. "She's telling them you've been violent, threatening, that you need to be somewhere safe before you hurt yourself, or her." I thanked Mrs. Doyle and closed the door, my hands shaking, not from fear, from fury. She wasn't just stealing my money or my home. She was stealing my sanity, my credibility, my very identity. She was going to have me locked away so she could live in comfort with my name on all the bills and no inconvenient daughter to ask questions. That's when I knew. She wasn't planning to let me leave her life. She was planning to erase me completely. I called James Carter immediately. "The intervention is Sunday," I said, my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through my veins. "We need to be ready." "We will be," he said. "I've been busy. I have handwriting analysis on those signatures, medical records proving she lied about her injuries, and Mrs. Doyle has agreed to testify. Rachel, we're going to end this." Saturday night, I didn't sleep. I sat at the kitchen table with everything spread out in front of me like battle plans. Bank statements, forged signatures, the altered deed, credit card bills for things I'd never bought. 12 years of my life reduced to evidence of theft. But there was something else. Something I'd found hidden in her bedroom when she'd gone to her book club. A folder labelled Rachel's Care Plan. Inside were brochures for assisted living facilities, psychiatric hospitals, and a half-finished application for emergency guardianship. The application painted me as unstable, violent, a danger to myself and others. She hadn't just been stealing from me. She'd been building a case to have me disappeared. Sunday arrived grey and cold. The family gathered in our living room, my former living room, like mourners at a wake. Sarah sat on the edge of the couch, wringing her hands. Uncle Tom stood by the window, avoiding my eyes. Aunt Helen clutched her purse like a shield. My mother sat in her favourite chair, the picture of wounded dignity. "Thank you all for coming," she began, her voice trembling with practised emotion. "I didn't want to do this, but I'm worried about Rachel. She's been different, paranoid, making wild accusations about money, about legal documents. I'm afraid she might hurt herself." Sarah nodded sympathetically. "We're here to help, Aunt Linda." "She's been saying terrible things," my mother continued, "claiming I stole from her, that I forged her signature. It breaks my heart to see her this way." That's when I walked in, but I wasn't alone. James Carter stepped through the doorway behind me, briefcase in hand, followed by Mrs. Doyle. The room went silent. "Good afternoon," James said, his voice carrying the authority of someone who'd spent decades in courtrooms. "I'm James Carter, Miss Monroe's attorney, and I believe there are some things this family needs to see." My mother's face went pale. "Rachel, what is this?" "This," I said, my voice steady and clear, "is the truth." James opened his briefcase and pulled out a stack of documents. "Ladies and gentlemen, what you're about to see is evidence of systematic financial abuse, identity theft, and fraud." He placed the first document on the coffee table. "These are bank records showing unauthorized withdrawals totaling $8,000, all signed with Ms. Monroe's forged signature." Uncle Tom leaned forward, studying the papers. "Linda, what is this?" "She's confused," my mother said quickly. "She signed those herself and forgot." James placed another document down. "This is a handwriting analysis from a certified expert. The signatures are forgeries." He looked directly at my mother. "Very practiced forgeries." Mrs. Doyle stepped forward. "I saw her practicing," she said quietly, "in her kitchen, signing Rachel's name over and over on scratch paper. When I asked what she was doing, she said she was helping Rachel with paperwork." The room shifted. I could feel the doubt creeping in, the careful certainty my mother had built starting to crack. "There's more," James continued. He placed the deed on the table. "This property deed was altered without Ms. Monroe's knowledge or consent. Her ownership stake was removed while she was out of the house." Sarah picked up the deed, her face confused. "Aunt Linda, why would you—" "She's lying," my mother snapped, the mask finally slipping. "They're all lying. Rachel put them up to this." "Did I put you up to this too?" I asked, pulling out the folder I'd found in her room. I opened it and spread the contents across the table. Brochures for psychiatric facilities, the guardianship application, a handwritten list titled Rachel's Problems that included delusional, aggressive, and financially irresponsible. The silence was deafening. "Being my mother," I said, my voice cutting through the quiet like a blade, "doesn't entitle you to steal my life." Uncle Tom picked up the guardianship application, his face growing darker with each line he read. "Linda, this says Rachel threatened you, says she's violent." "She has been," my mother said, but her voice was smaller now, defensive. "You don't see what goes on behind closed doors." "Show them," I said, pulling out my phone. I opened the voice recording app and played the audio I'd captured 2 nights before. My mother's voice, clear and calculating, came through the speaker. The intervention needs to look legitimate. Make sure you mention her mood swings, how she's been paranoid about money. Rachel's always been weak. She'll break down and prove our point. If we can get her committed for 72 hours, I can file the emergency guardianship while she's inside. Then finally, I can live in peace. The recording played in the silent room like a confession. Sarah's hand flew to her mouth. Aunt Helen actually gasped. That's not, my mother stammered. That's your voice, I said. Planning to have me locked up so you could steal what's left of my life. James placed one final document on the table. Medical records from Dallas General dated 12 years ago, the devastating fall that brought Rachel home, a minor bruise on her hip, no fracture, no surgery, no reason for long-term care. The room exploded. You lied about being hurt, Sarah's voice was shrill with disbelief. You made her give up everything for a bruise. Uncle Tom stood up, his face red with anger. My mother looked around the room, seeing her support crumble in real time. You don't understand, she said desperately. I was lonely. I needed her. A mother needs her daughter. A mother, I said, standing up, my voice carrying 12 years of suppressed rage, doesn't forge her daughter's signature. A mother doesn't steal her daughter's inheritance. A mother doesn't try to have her daughter committed to steal her freedom. I walked to the mantel and picked up a framed photo from my childhood. It showed me at 16, smiling that small, careful smile of someone who'd already learned to make herself invisible. This girl, I said, holding up the photo, gave up her art career, her apartment, her dreams, her entire life because she thought love meant sacrifice. She was wrong. Love doesn't demand everything. Theft does. My mother stood up, her mask finally cracking completely. After everything I've done for you, I raised you. I gave you life. And I gave you 12 years of mine, I shot back. That debt is paid. She lunged toward me then, her face twisted with rage, and for a moment I saw who she really was underneath all the gentle manipulation. You ungrateful little... That's enough, Uncle Tom said, stepping between us. Linda, you need to leave. This is my house, she screamed. No, James said calmly, pulling out another document. According to the original deed, before your fraudulent alterations, this house belongs to both of you. Ms. Monroe has every legal right to be here. You, however, have committed multiple felonies on this property. I looked around the room at my family, my real family, seeing me clearly for the first time in years. Sarah was crying. Uncle Tom looked sick. Aunt Helen was staring at my mother like she'd never seen her before. I want her out, I said, my voice steady. Today. And for the first time in 12 years, my family backed me up. The next few hours passed like a fever dream. Uncle Tom and James worked together to pack my mother's belongings while she sat in her chair, silent and shrunken, the fight finally gone out of her. Sarah called a locksmith. Aunt Helen found the spare keys my mother had hidden around the house and collected them in a small pile on the kitchen counter. Where will she go? Sarah asked, her voice still shaky from the revelations. She has options, James said. Her sister in Phoenix offered years ago. There's a senior community downtown with availability. She's not helpless, despite what she's pretended. My mother finally spoke, her voice small and bitter. You're all making a mistake. Rachel needs me. She can't survive on her own. I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw not the frail woman who'd needed my care, but the architect of my prison. I survived 12 years of you, I said. I think I can handle surviving without you. As they loaded her suitcases into Uncle Tom's car, she turned back one last time. Not to apologize, not to acknowledge what she'd done, but to try one final manipulation. No one will ever love you like I do, Rachel. I met her eyes and felt nothing but relief. Thank God for that. The locksmith finished his work just as the sun was setting. New deadbolts, new keys, new beginning. I stood in the doorway, testing the weight of the key in my hand, and felt something I hadn't felt in 12 years. Ownership. But she wasn't done fighting. 2 weeks later, she tried her final card. A knock at my door now, and there she stood, leaning heavily on a cane, her face drawn and pale. "Rachel," she whispered, "I'm sick, really sick this time. The doctors say I don't have long." For a moment, just a moment, the old programming kicked in. The daughter who'd dropped everything for a bruised hip started to step forward. Then I saw it. The medical records James had gotten from her doctor were still on my kitchen table. Perfect health, clean bill, no illness except the one she was performing. "Show me the medical records," I said. Her face flickered. I don't have them with me." "Then show me tomorrow, with a doctor's signature." She straightened up, the cane suddenly forgotten. "You're really going to make your dying mother prove she's sick? You're really going to lie about dying to manipulate me?" The mask slipped completely. "You owe me," she screamed. "I'm your mother. You owe me your life." "I gave you 12 years, I said. "That's more than you deserved." I closed the door. This time I didn't look back. The karma came swift and complete. Within a month, word had spread. The church ladies stopped calling. Neighbours crossed the street. Sarah and Uncle Tom cut contact. She ended up in a studio apartment across town, alone with the consequences of her choices. James filed criminal charges for the forgeries and fraud. She pled guilty to avoid trial, receiving 2 years probation and an order to pay full restitution. The guardianship application was dismissed with prejudice. No devoted daughter to manage her bills, cook her meals, or absorb her cruelty. Just the life she'd built for herself, empty and cold. I changed the locks again, just to be sure. Then I did something I hadn't done in 12 years. I bought art supplies. 1 year later, my house, was unrecognizable. The walls that had been beige and sterile for 12 years now blazed with color. My paintings hung in every room, bright abstracts that captured all the emotions I'd buried for over a decade. The living room where she used to hold court was now my studio, easels and canvases scattered like promises I'd finally kept to myself. I was hosting my first real dinner party in years. Mrs. Doyle, James Carter, Sarah, even my old art professor, Dr. Martinez, were there, tears in her eyes as she looked at my new work. "You found your voice again," she said, squeezing my hand. "It's stronger than before." She was right. The art I was creating now wasn't the careful, pretty pieces I'd made in my 20s. These were raw, honest, fierce. They told the story of a woman who'd been buried alive and clawed her way back to the surface. I'd started teaching small art classes in my home. Students who, like me, had lost themselves somewhere along the way. We painted our anger, our freedom, our second chances. The house that had been a mausoleum for my dreams was now a sanctuary for others finding their way back to themselves. To Rachel, Mrs. Doyle raised her glass, who reminded us all that it's never too late to reclaim your life. As glasses clinked around the table, I felt something I'd forgotten existed. Joy. Not the careful, conditional happiness I'd learned to accept, but pure, uncomplicated joy. Later that night, I sat in my studio surrounded by my paintings. The silence was full of possibility. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "I'm sorry. Can we talk?" I blocked it without hesitation. Some doors should stay closed. Maybe I wasn't meant to be seen by her, but I was finally seeing myself. The woman who'd given up everything wasn't weak. She was generous. The woman who'd finally said no wasn't cruel. She was free. Justice isn't always a gavel falling in a courtroom. Sometimes it's the simple, radical act of choosing yourself. I learned that love without boundaries isn't love, it's theft. Real love makes space for you to grow, not disappear. Your boundaries aren't betrayal, they're survival. They're the map back to yourself when the people who raised you try to redraw the lines for their comfort. So tell me, when someone demands your whole life as proof of love, do you give it to them, or do you teach them that love has limits? Share your story in the comments below. And if you believe that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is say no, hit that subscribe button for more Whispers of Revenge.